At a gathering among friends, my wife presented me with a $10 coupon before the entire company. She and her lover, a man whose true role I was then ignorant of, shared a laugh in that moment. Yet that trivial jest proved to be the final indignity. What they remain unaware of is that soon, her lover will be the one kneeling before me. And when that hour arrives, I shall be the one who laughs. My name is Michael Walker. Have you ever experienced one of those evenings when you sense the very ground fracturing beneath your feet, yet somehow you alone seem to perceive it? That was my state as I sat at a polished mahogany table in a crowded downtown restaurant, glass in hand, surrounded by friends who were laughing and drinking, while I silently wondered when precisely my life had transformed into a theatrical performance in which I played the role of the fool. I felt the sharp sting of the jest even before it was delivered. Rachel, my wife of 8 years, wore a broad grin, the sort that never quite reaches the eyes, as she passed a small, vivid red envelope across the table to me. Everyone leaned in, eager and smiling as though awaiting some grand, special moment. I ought to have known better. With a strained smile, I opened it. Inside lay a $10 coupon for some generic store I did not even recognize, a place that peddled discount socks and cheap candy. At first, I assumed it was a prank, a preliminary jest before the true gift was revealed. But Rachel did not blink. She tilted her wine glass toward me, her voice pitched just loudly enough to rise above the clatter of cutlery and the murmur of conversation. "Well, Mikey," she began, and God, how I despised when she used that name in public. "I figured since you're between your great successes at the moment, this might help you pick up a few essentials." She winked. The table erupted in laughter. I laughed as well, or at least my mouth formed the appropriate shape. Within, something delicate and brittle snapped. They did not see it. Of course they did not. I took care that they would not. I clutched that absurd coupon as though it were some priceless treasure and fixed upon my face the sort of smile one wears when another steps upon your foot, yet you are too polite to protest. It would have been impolite to scream. I raised my glass in a mock toast, played the good sport, and let the evening roll on. But my heart was no longer in it. Every laugh that night sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Every clink of silverware scraped my nerves raw. And through it all, Rachel sat there, radiant and smug, basking in the attention as though she had just won a prize. Perhaps she believed she had. I watched her toss her hair back, flirting easily with Daniel, her colleague, who somehow found himself invited to nearly every gathering we hosted these days. I watched her hand linger a second too long on his wrist when he passed her a plate, and I stayed silent. I smiled when it was expected. I cracked a few jokes, keeping the rhythm of the night alive like a dutiful puppet, because that is what they anticipated. That is what she expected. Inside, however, I was a steel trap snapping shut. Can you imagine it? Sitting there surrounded by people you once called friends, watching your wife humiliate you with a smile, and realizing you are the only one in the room who understands this is not a game. That was the moment I grasped something vital. They believed I was powerless. They thought Michael Walker, the man they once admired, the one they used to lean on, had become merely a washed-up, harmless relic, a joke, a background character in their brighter, shinier lives. Rachel thought so too, perhaps especially Rachel. I sipped my wine slowly, letting the bitterness coat my tongue. I nodded along as Daniel launched into some tedious story about his latest prospects for promotion, Rachel laughing brightly at every dull punchline. And as the night dragged on, with the lights soft and golden and the city humming just outside the windows, I made a quiet decision. I would not fight back tonight. No angry scene, no public meltdown. That would be too easy, too expected. No, I would smile. I would let them believe they had won. Because sometimes the most profound victories begin in silence. The finest revenge does not arise from standing up and shouting. Sometimes the sweetest vengeance begins with a single, chilling thought. You have no idea whom you are humiliating. And when the check finally arrived, when Rachel made a show of patting her empty clutch, laughing that she had forgotten her wallet once again, I paid without blinking, without flinching. Yet deep beneath the smile, behind the courteous goodnights and the firm handshakes, something new had settled into place within me. Something cold, something patient, the kind of patience that makes a man calm and dangerous. The front door clicked shut behind me with a hollow sound, swallowed by the cavernous quiet of the house. I stood there for a moment, keys dangling from my fingers, coat still clinging to my shoulders. The silence pressed in from all sides, thick, heavy, almost expectant. Rachel had gone straight to bed. Of course she had. She was good at that, making a mess and slipping away before the pieces even began to fall. I slipped off my shoes, padding quietly across the polished floors. The house smelled faintly of her perfume, something floral, expensive, something I had bought for her once, back when gifts still meant something real. Without thinking, my feet carried me where they always did when my mind needed space. My office. It was not much, a converted bedroom tucked away at the far end of the house, but it was mine, my island. No candles, no throw pillows, no live, laugh, love signs cluttering the walls. Only dark wood, cold leather, and the quiet hum of the city outside the window. I sank into the heavy chair behind my desk, the cushions creaking under my weight. The air smelled of old paper, coffee grounds, and something else, something colder, like steel left out in winter. My fingers brushed over the annual report lying there, half forgotten, its edges crisp and sharp beneath my hand. A thick, glossy booklet. My company's latest numbers, my own. The company's logo, that same gleaming crest Rachel loved to show off to her friends whenever it suited her. I traced the gold embossed lettering almost absently. She didn't even realize the luxury brand she idolized, the one she so carelessly waved around tonight, was mine. Not Daniel's, nor any of those clowns laughing at my expense tonight. Mine. Built from the ground up when no one believed I could do it. Not even her. I leaned back, letting my head rest against the leather headrest, and stared up at the dark ceiling. You'd think the betrayal would burn hottest right then. But strangely, it didn't. It was quieter than that. Deeper, like a slow tide pulling at the foundations of everything I thought I knew. I should have seen it sooner. The little digs at my career. The subtle way she began dressing up more for work events. The long, breathless text she tried to hide when she thought I wasn't looking. A smarter man, a less trusting man, would have spotted it months ago. But love blinds you in the most vicious ways, doesn't it? You tell yourself the late nights are just overtime. You explain away the coldness, the cheap shots, the way her eyes light up when someone else's name comes up in conversation. You make excuses because admitting the truth means admitting you lost something, admitting you weren't enough. And there's no humiliation quite like that. I picked up the annual report and flipped it open to the first page. Profit margins, growth charts, year-over-year projections. All of it mine. All of it invisible tonight, buried under a cheap coupon and 100 cutting jokes about missed opportunities and bad timing. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I sat there and let the realization wash over me, cool and clean. They didn't just betray Michael, the man. They betrayed Michael, the architect of their comfort, their easy dinners, their flashy vacations, their entire illusion of security. They believed they could act without consequence. I closed the report slowly, the leather binding emitting a soft, definitive snap. Patience, I reminded myself, the kind measured not in seconds, but in scars. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight was for stillness, for allowing the weight of it all to settle deep into my bones. Tomorrow. Tomorrow would arrive soon enough. I leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk, hands steepled beneath my chin, and gazed into the gathering darkness. If you ever wish to discern what a man is made of, do not watch him in victory. Watch him in the moments after you have humiliated him. That is when the true story begins. Mornings once felt different. There was a time when the aroma of coffee drifting through the kitchen was enough to fill the day with a sense of possibility. When the soft shuffle of Rachel's footsteps overhead brought comfort, not suspicion. But no longer. The sun had barely crested the horizon as I slipped from bed, careful not to disturb the silence that lay over our house like settled dust. Rachel murmured something indistinct, half buried in the blankets, then turned and drifted back into sleep. I watched her a moment longer than I should have. Then I turned and left without a sound. The coffee shop on the corner opened early. A small, tucked-away place where the barista knew my order by heart and the windows fogged slightly in the winter chill. I liked it because no one knew me there. This morning, I needed anonymity more than ever. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. I ordered a black coffee, extra strong, and took a booth in the far corner, my back to the wall, facing the door. Old habits die hard. For a time, I simply sat, letting the steam curl from the cup, allowing the quiet to seep into my bones. Then, almost without thought, I reached for Rachel's phone. It had been tossed into my jacket pocket the night before. She must have shoved it there in her drunken laughter, too busy basking in Daniel's praise to notice. I hadn't even realized I possessed it until now. Funny how life hands you exactly what you need when you stop chasing it. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. A better man might have set it aside, might have told himself that trust mattered more than curiosity. But trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. I tapped the screen. It blinked to life without a password. Of course, Rachel trusted me too much to even bother locking me out anymore. Or perhaps she simply didn't think I mattered enough to care. The home screen was cluttered. Shopping apps, fitness trackers, endless group chats with women who cared more about brunch reservations than real loyalty. I almost closed it right there. Almost. But something pulled me deeper. I opened her messages, scrolled past the usual noise, friends, coworkers, random delivery notifications. And then I saw it. Daniel. No last name, just Daniel. As if that first name alone needed no further clarification. I opened the thread. The first message hit like a cold slap. Last night was hilarious. I love when you tease him like that. He's so clueless. Another. When are we sneaking off again? I miss your laugh already. And Rachel's reply. Soon, I hope. He's so wrapped up in his business plans lately. He doesn't even notice when I'm gone. I stared at the screen, the words swimming slightly as my grip tightened around the phone. No anger, no shouting, no public scene. Just a sharp, clean coldness settling in like the surface of a frozen lake. I set the phone down slowly, watching the screen dim and go black. Can you imagine it? Reading, in her own words, exactly how small she thought of you, how easy you were to outmaneuver, how disposable you'd become in the story of your own life. I took a long, slow sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter taste, letting it anchor me. No confrontation. Not yet. This was not the moment to ignite everything in a blaze of fury. That would have granted them precisely what they anticipated, a man so shattered by betrayal that he could no longer think clearly. No, I saw with perfect clarity now. They believed me oblivious. They believed me weak. Let them. For the exquisite truth of being underestimated is that no one sees you approaching when you finally choose to act. I slipped Rachel's phone back into my pocket and rose, leaving a few crumpled bills beneath the rim of my coffee cup. The morning air outside was sharp, biting. It stung my cheeks and cleared my mind. I walked home slowly, my boots crunching over the frost-rimed sidewalk. Each step felt deliberate, measured. I would not merely survive this. I would not merely endure it. I would claim it as my own. And by the time they realized what I had done, it would already be too late. The nature of betrayal is this. Once witnessed, it cannot be unseen. It tints everything. Every conversation, every glance, every casual remark suddenly feels weightier, charged. That morning, standing beneath the cavernous glass lobby of our company's headquarters, I allowed it all to wash over me. The cold marble floor gleamed underfoot. The revolving doors hissed softly. Phones rang in the distance, polite and professional. From the outside, it was merely another Tuesday in the corporate world. But for me, it was the first move upon a new chessboard. I offered a casual nod to the receptionist, who tapped away at her keyboard without looking up. She did not know me. Not like this. Not when I was no longer wearing the familiar mask. I made my way to the bank of elevators, pressed the button for the executive floor, and waited, whistling a low, cheerful tune under my breath, an old habit from the days when I ran deliveries for my uncle's print shop, back when no one noticed me either. The doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside alone. I drew out my phone. Not my personal one. The other one. The one registered under the holding company name that no one here even knew existed. The shell corporation I had spent the last year building quietly, brick by legal brick. Everyone thought I was too sentimental to ever let go of my shares. They were wrong. I thumbed through the secured app, the glowing blue logo winking back at me. 3 taps. 1 confirmation. A mandatory executive meeting was scheduled for noon in the boardroom. The subject line was simple, sterile, and impossible to ignore. Urgent corporate consolidation notice. It was the kind of summons that brought out the rats faster than fire in the walls. The elevator chimed upon reaching the executive floor. Sleek gray carpet muffled my steps. Frosted glass walls shimmered with morning light. Names were etched on the doors in a sharp, professional font. Daniel Gray, VP of Business Development. I smiled faintly as I passed his office. He wasn't in yet, probably too busy sleeping off the hangover from their rooftop celebrations the night before. Good. I didn't want to see him yet anyway. Not until it counted. By the time I left the building, slipping back into the city's steady hum, the pieces were in motion. All that was left now was patience. And patience, I was finding, came a lot easier when you had clarity in your veins instead of hope. The house smelled like cheap takeout when I walked through the door that evening. Rachel's voice floated from the kitchen, bright and buoyant, filling the air before I even saw her. And then Daniel said, she laughed, that he might get a promotion soon. Can you believe it? I stepped into the room, letting the door swing shut behind me. She stood at the counter, digging into a carton of lo mein with chopsticks, one leg tucked casually under her as she perched on a bar stool. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her phone buzzed constantly on the counter. I just watched her for a moment. Watched the way she glowed when she talked about him. Watched the way she didn't even. She glanced up as I entered the room. I walked to the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water, and slowly twisted the cap, savoring the small, sharp crack of the plastic seal. Rachel continued talking, unaware. I told him he absolutely deserves it. All his hard work, the networking, building the right connections, you know. She winked. The real secret sauce. I offered a faint smile and took a sip of water. Networking. Connections. Daniel's success wasn't built on connections. It was built on borrowed time. Time that had just run out. Rachel finally looked over at me, her eyes bright with shallow excitement. You should come out with us next time, she said teasingly. Daniel's hilarious when he's had a few drinks. You'd actually like him if you gave him a chance. I returned a slow, even look, as though considering it. Maybe, I said simply, and left it at that. No accusations, no bitterness, no hint of the iceberg lurking just beneath the surface. She smiled, satisfied, and turned back to her noodles, chattering on about some new wine bar they wanted to try next weekend. Meanwhile, inside, I marked the days and counted the hours. The trap was set, the players were in position. All that remained was to wait for the hammer to fall. The sterile chill of the lawyer's office was precisely what I needed. Hard edges, no warmth, no sympathy, only clean lines and cold facts. I sat across from Harold Strickland, a man whose talent for ruthless precision was worth every cent of his astronomical hourly rate. He was gray-haired, hawk-eyed, and spoke with the slow, deliberate confidence of someone who had buried far more powerful men than Daniel Gray without breaking a sweat. The documents lay spread between us, an immaculate battlefield in black and white. Everything's lined up, Harold said, tapping a thick folder with one manicured finger. Once you pull the trigger, there's no walking it back. I nodded, flipping through the pages one final time. Daniel's termination papers. The board's emergency reorganization documents. Confidential memos detailing Daniel's minor but costly infractions. Infractions he had foolishly assumed no one was paying attention to. And then, nestled neatly at the bottom, the divorce proceedings. Cold, clean, devastating. There was no walking back. I agree, I said quietly. Harold smiled thinly. It was not a friendly expression, but one of approval. I'll have my team standing by after the meeting, he said. Security too, just in case. I closed the folder carefully and slid it back across the table. Thank you, Harold. He shrugged, slipping the papers into a sleek leather case. Just doing my job, he said. Then, off the record, he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. They never see it coming when it's served with a smile. I smiled back, small, sharp. Neither would Rachel. Neither would Daniel. The game was already over. They just didn't know they had lost yet. The rooftop bar glowed like a jewel against the velvet night sky. I stood on the neighboring terrace, half shielded by a planter of wilting greenery, the cool wind tugging at my jacket. Below, laughter floated up like smoke. Rachel and Daniel were perched at the edge of the rooftop lounge, drinks in hand, oblivious to the world around them. Rachel's head was thrown back, her mouth open in a bright, careless laugh, one I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Daniel leaned in too close, his hand brushing her knee. Casual, practiced, shameless. A younger version of me might have charged in there, might have made a scene, demanded answers no one was honest enough to give. But not tonight. Tonight, I was the ghost, the shadow watching them celebrate their brief, pathetic victory. Rachel nudged Daniel with her shoulder, laughing again at something he whispered in her ear. The intimacy of it was a slap I didn't even feel anymore. It didn't hurt. Not now. Now it only confirmed what I already knew. They believed they were safe, secure, untouchable. They believed they had broken me down into the hollow shell they required. Too weary, too defeated to ever resist. I slipped my hands into my coat pockets, feeling the smooth, reassuring weight of the spare key card nestled within. It granted access to everything they assumed I had forgotten. Access they had gifted me without even realizing it. Above, the rooftop's string lights swayed gently in the wind, twinkling like distant stars. The city murmured softly below, thousands of lives rushing onward, unaware that two of them were about to discover just how swiftly a life can unravel. Rachel clinked her glass against Daniel's, smiling broadly. I smiled as well, because tomorrow was not a promise, it was a reckoning. And as I turned and vanished into the night, leaving them to their champagne dreams and borrowed futures, one final thought settled into place like a stone at the bottom of a cold, deep lake. Some betrayals you forgive, others you outlive. There is a particular kind of silence that dwells in corporate boardrooms. It is not the warm, contemplative quiet of libraries. This silence is heavier, a cold hush sharpened by ambition and fear, and the constant, humming awareness that power could shift in an instant. That was the silence that met me when I entered the boardroom. 12 men and women sat around the long, gleaming conference table, laptops open, phones buzzing quietly, expensive pens tapping against leather-bound notebooks. At the far end, Daniel Grace slouched in his chair as though he owned the place, arms spread wide, grinning easily at a joke that had never been funny. Beside him, perched in a seat she had no true right to occupy, was Rachel, wearing the same sly, polished smile she had worn the night she handed me that cheap coupon. The same smile she wore when she believed she was winning. I let the door close softly behind me. No dramatic entrance, no slammed fists or shouted accusations. With only quiet, deliberate steps across the carpet, my dress shoes made barely a sound. At first, no one truly looked up. They were too preoccupied with refreshing their emails, too certain that this was merely another pointless meeting on another forgettable morning. It was not until I reached the head of the table, the seat reserved for whoever ran the ship, that the first ripple of awareness passed through the room. Rachel's gaze lifted lazily, her lips parting in automatic amusement, until her eyes truly registered who was standing there. The color drained from her face so swiftly it was almost fascinating. Daniel frowned, straightening in his chair, confusion flashing across his features. I gave them all a calm, pleasant smile. "Good morning," I said, my voice even and controlled. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Rachel's fingers gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles whitened. Daniel glanced at her, then back at me, his eyebrows knitting together. What is this?" he said, the first thin crack of unease threading into his voice. I turned toward the projector screen mounted on the wall behind me. With a tap of a button, the company's holding structure lit up, sleek blue and white graphics cascading across the display. At the very top of the pyramid, under the glowing header Majority Ownership, a single name sat in crisp, unambiguous font: Michael Walker. I did not look back immediately. I let the truth breathe in the room for a moment. Let it take root. When I finally turned, I caught Daniel's expression, a beautiful, perfect collision of confusion, panic, and dawning horror. Rachel was already staring at the screen as though it were some ancient curse come to life. "I know many of you are meeting me under different circumstances than you expected," I said, pacing slowly along the edge of the table. "Allow me to clarify." I gestured toward the chart behind me. Through a series of silent acquisitions over the past 2 years, I have regained majority control of this company. Quietly, legally, irrevocably. I paused, letting that sink in. Effective immediately, there will be leadership changes. Effective immediately, certain contracts will be reviewed. Effective immediately. I turned and locked eyes with Daniel, my voice still calm, still surgical. Certain relationships that have compromised the integrity of this institution will be severed. Daniel half rose from his chair, one hand raised as if he might object, might plead, but the words caught in his throat because deep down he knew it was over. Rachel opened her mouth, but no sound came out, only a shallow, rattling breath. I leaned forward slightly, my palms resting lightly on the polished surface of the table. "And one more thing," I said softly, my voice dropping into the deadliest calm I could muster. "No appeals, no second chances, no desperate explanations, no salvation." The silence that followed was perfect, heavy, absolute, exactly the way I had planned it. And as I stood there, watching the quiet implosion unfold across Daniel's face, across Rachel's shrinking posture, a strange, serene satisfaction settled over me. They had thought they were playing with a broken man. They had no idea they were standing in front of the architect of their downfall. For a moment after I finished speaking, no one moved. The boardroom, usually a hive of subtle power plays and whispered negotiations, felt frozen, locked in a single collective breath no one dared to release. Daniel was the first to crack. He lurched halfway out of his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a man drowning in air he could not swallow. "Michael, buddy," he stammered, pasting a smile onto his face so painfully fake it almost hurt to look at. This has to be a misunderstanding, right? I mean, come on. We're all on the same team here." His voice pitched higher on the last words, desperation fraying the edges. I observed him in silence, allowing the words to linger in the air. Across the table, Rachel sat stiffly, her hands clenched together so fiercely I feared she might fracture her own fingers. Her complexion had turned a pallid hue I had not witnessed since our initial hospital crisis years ago, back when genuine fear and true stakes still existed between us. Now, there was no vitality left in those wide, panicked eyes, only the dawning horror of realizing the game was over, and she had not even known she was playing against the house. I moved slowly and deliberately toward the stack of documents Harold's team had prepared. There was no rush, no anger, only the methodical precision of a man closing a final incision. I withdrew a thick, stamped envelope containing Daniel's termination paperwork and laid it flat on the table before him. "For your review," I stated simply. Daniel stared at it, as though it might ignite. "This is insane," he blurted out, with a laughable attempt at bravado. "You can't just fire me out of nowhere. I mean, after everything I've done for this company." The room remained deathly still. No one supported him. No one even glanced his way, for they could all read the writing on the wall now. And no one wishes to stand too close to a man being executed. I kept my voice calm, almost clinical. "You will find detailed records of your performance reviews, discrepancies in project reporting, and numerous violations of company policy regarding undisclosed relationships with subordinates." I paused just long enough to let the final words twist the knife. Rachel flinched as if I had struck her. Daniel swallowed hard, his face flushing a deep crimson. "This isn't fair," he hissed under his breath, leaning in slightly as though proximity might rescue him. You don't have to do this, Mike. We can talk about it, man to man." I looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time in months. And what I saw was not a rival. It was not even an enemy. It was something smaller. A coward scrambling to climb out of a hole he had gleefully dug for himself. I straightened up, smoothing the crease in my jacket sleeve. "There is nothing left to discuss," I said quietly. Across the room, the door opened with a soft hiss. Two uniformed security officers stepped inside, their faces impassive, hands clasped loosely in front of them. Daniel's shoulders sagged as he turned to see them. The fight went out of him in one shuddering breath. He did not resist, did not argue. He merely gathered his things with trembling hands, stuffing papers and pens into his worn leather briefcase, like a man packing up the last, sad pieces of a life he would not be coming back to. Rachel stood halfway up from her seat, her mouth opening, perhaps to protest, perhaps to beg, but I did not give her the chance. I turned away, facing the window that overlooked the city skyline, my hands folded neatly behind my back. I did not need to watch them go. I did not need to see the tears welling in her eyes. Their humiliation was not my victory. My victory was in my stillness, in my silence, in the unshakable truth that I had already won, and there was nothing they could do to change it. Behind me, the security guards guided Daniel gently, but firmly toward the door. Rachel's heels clicked against the floor as she followed a few frantic steps behind, her voice breaking on a choked whisper, "Michael, please." But I did not turn. I did not answer. I simply picked up the next folder from the table, thumbing through it calmly, as if reviewing paperwork on any other ordinary day. Because for me it was. Their ending was not my emergency. It was just another item crossed neatly off the list. The double doors swung shut behind Daniel with a hollow, echoing thud. For a long moment, the room stayed frozen. The remaining executives sat stiffly in their chairs, breathing shallowly, exchanging quick, sidelong glances as if afraid even a whisper might draw attention. Their attention turned my way, though I scarcely noticed, for the only sound I now perceived was the sharp, uneven tapping of Rachel's heels against the polished floor as she hurried after Daniel. "Michael," she called again, nearer this time. Her voice cracked beneath the weight of a panic she could no longer conceal. I did not turn to look. I had no need. I could sense her behind me, the tremor in her breath, the fraying edges of what was once unshakable confidence. She caught up just as the security guards ushered Daniel through the lobby beyond. And for the first time in years, there was no calculation in her tone, no strategy, only raw, naked desperation. "Michael, please, you don't understand," she gasped, reaching for my arm. Her fingers brushed the fabric of my jacket, light and frantic. I did not move, did not recoil. I merely stood there, allowing the moment to stretch thin and brittle between us. She was still clinging to the old rules, the old leverage, believing there was something left to salvage, thinking that if she wept hard enough, pleaded sweetly enough, I might crack open a door she had already slammed shut behind her. I turned slowly, finally meeting her eyes. For an instant, she appeared a stranger to me, not the woman I had married, nor the partner I once believed in, but simply another person who had mistaken kindness for weakness and never once imagined there would be a cost. Rachel's mascara had begun to smudge beneath her eyes. Her hands fluttered uselessly at her sides, as though she no longer knew what to do with them. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We were just having fun. Daniel didn't mean anything. I didn't mean for it to go this far." She bit her lip hard, and the words tumbled out faster now, desperate and clumsy. "We can fix this, Michael. We can make it right. I swear. I still love you. Please don't do this." A few heads turned from across the room, curious. I felt no pity. I did not even blink. Instead, I reached into the folder, still open upon the conference table, withdrew the final document, and laid it flat against the polished wood. I took up the sleek silver pen that Harold had tucked into the folder's spine, and with one clean, decisive stroke, I signed my name at the bottom of the page. There was no hesitation, no second thought. Rachel flinched as though struck. She looked down at the paper, blinking rapidly, struggling to comprehend what had just transpired. Her lips parted, perhaps to speak my name, perhaps to plead once more, but I did not wait to learn which. I closed the folder neatly, pressing it shut with my fingertips, then handed it to one of the assistants who had been lingering nervously at the room's periphery. "File it," I said, my voice plain. The assistant nodded hastily, gathering the documents with trembling hands before slipping out through the side door. Rachel took an unsteady step toward me. "Michael, don't do this," she whispered. I observed her then, truly observed her. I saw the fine cracks spreading like a spiderweb across the perfect facade she had worked so diligently to maintain. I watched the understanding settle upon her, sharp and brutal. There would be no forgiveness, no last-minute reprieve, no emotional reunion to spare her from the consequences she had never imagined she would face. I adjusted the cuff of my sleeve, smoothing the fabric with slow, deliberate motions. And then I turned away. There was no parting remark, no cruel final word, only the simple, devastating absence of anything at all. For sometimes, the most brutal thing one can offer another is nothing. I walked out of the boardroom without a backward glance, the sound of my own footsteps steady and certain against the marble floor. Behind me, Rachel's sob broke free, a small, fractured sound that echoed off the cold walls before fading into silence. I did not stop. I did not hesitate. The past was behind me, and the future was mine. The lobby was a cavern of glass and steel, sunlight pouring through the towering windows like a silent flood. I descended the marble steps slowly, each footfall deliberate, unhurried. Behind me, I could still hear Rachel. Her broken cries ricocheted off the polished walls, raw and aching. The kind of sound a person makes when they finally realize the future they had taken for granted is slipping through their fingers, and they are powerless to stop it. Security maintained a discreet but firm distance between us, standing silently by as she stumbled after me. "Michael, please," she gasped, her voice cracked and hoarse. "Don't do this. We can fix it. You don't have to throw everything away." I kept walking. No faster, no slower, just steady. Because what she did not understand, what she would never understand, was that I was not throwing anything away. I was setting myself free. A few passers-by in tailored suits glanced up from their phones, their conversations faltering for just a moment as they took in the scene unfolding before them. I did not care. Let them see. Let the world see what happens when someone plays games with a man willing to lose everything just to reclaim himself. As I neared the massive glass doors, a receptionist offered a timid, uncertain smile, the kind people give when they are not sure if they are witnessing a tragedy or a triumph. I gave her a nod, polite, distant, and pushed the door open. The morning air hit me like a baptism, crisp, bright, unforgiving. I stepped out into it without hesitation, the heavy glass door whispering shut behind me with a soft, decisive click. For a moment, I stood there, letting the sunlight wash over me. The city stretched out before me, vast and alive, and utterly indifferent to the tiny human dramas unfolding within it. Behind me, inside that gleaming tower, Rachel was still crying, still pleading, but it was already over. The mirrored surface shimmered beneath the morning light, reflecting back not the man who had walked in months ago, tired, betrayed, uncertain, but someone else entirely. Someone sharper, stronger, unbreakable. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air, feeling the weight of the past finally, blessedly, lift from my shoulders. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with something far more dangerous, peace. Real peace. The kind you only find when you stop chasing what is already lost and begin building what comes next. I adjusted the cuffs of my jacket, slid my hands into my pockets, and started walking. Each step away from the building was a small rebellion, a quiet declaration that I owed no one anything anymore. Not explanations, not forgiveness, not even memories. Behind me, the glass doors remained closed, the sun climbed higher, and the city swallowed me whole. Not as a man defeated, but as a man reborn. If this story touched you somewhere deep, if you have ever walked out stronger after being broken, leave a comment. I want to hear your story, too. And if you are ready for more tales of resilience, betrayal, and rising up, be sure to press that subscribe button. This is only the beginning.